you have to have a great freebie that people want. Realistically, you probably need a lot more than one freebie. Maybe it's 457. I exaggerate in jest here. But the point is that you are going to need one or more freebies to give away to people to get them to join your email list.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klinck proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klinck.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 49 of the Online Genius Podcast. I am your host, Bobby Klinck, and I am excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about a topic that I love, a topic I love talking about. This week, we're continuing our theme about getting started in business. Now, you'll remember last week we talked about written agreements that you're going to need as you get started in your business, kind of your business startup toolbox when it comes to agreements. This week's episode is a topic related to online marketing that's so important and so foundational that I'm including it in the Getting Started theme. It's really one of the only kind of ideas around online marketing that we're talking about during this phase, and I think it's that important. Today, we're talking about list building. This is a critical piece of success. And so you need to have thought this through and have a good plan for building your email list from the get-go. Now, if you've already started your business, this maybe is a good refresher. I'm going to walk through some very important concepts you need to know. If you haven't started this yet, good. You need to be here because I'm going to walk through kind of and give you a mini masterclass on the subject. But before we dive in, this week's episode, like last week's episode, is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. Now, like I said, I love coming to you every week here on the podcast. I love talking with you. I love giving these lessons, but I really wanted a place where I could go deeper, where we could have additional conversations, where I could kind of add on content. That's why I created the podcast community. It's so that we have a chance to talk about issues related to what we're talking about on the show, but I can also do live training, give you resources, do Q&A sessions, etc. So that's what the Online Genius community is all about, and it's absolutely free. You can join by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, that's youronlinegenius.com/community, and that'll take you over to the Facebook group. You can ask to join. Just make sure to answer the questions, and then I'll let you in. So that's it. Let's go ahead and dive in. Now, if you talk to just about any successful online entrepreneur, they're going to tell you about the importance of list buildings. You'll hear them say things like the strength of your business is based on the size of your engaged email list. Or maybe something as simple as your list is your business. The point they're making is simple. It's that, look, through all of the phases of the cool marketing tips, marketing tricks, strategies, new tools, new ideas like bots and all this other stuff, email marketing has stood the test of time and remains a very powerful tool. There were a lot of people who've chased other shiny objects, like, for example, social media. When Facebook pages first came about, people spent tons of time and money on those, new ideas and new ways of marketing, only to find out that they went by the wayside, either because someone else owned the content or owned the platform and changed the rules, or because they went out of vogue. And email is the exception. And I can attest to this from my own business. I'll tell you that my email list has been a key factor in the success of every launch I've had. Any launch that I've had that's been successful has been a result of my list. And when I've gone away from my list, things haven't gone as well. Now, look, you can use, cold audiences and Facebook advertising and Google advertising and all these other things to try to get customers. But I will tell you that in my experience, the people on your email list who've been on there for a little bit are always going to be an easier sell. Those are the people from whom you are going to make the most money over time. So today, we're going to be focusing on list building. And I'm going to be talking about the 4 phases of list building. So let's dive into those now. The first phase is to build your list. And you may say, wait, isn't this the whole thing? No, this is literally only phase 1. This is get people onto your list. Now, there's a couple of schools of thought here. Some people will just have something that says, hey, join my newsletter, and they'll have that on their website. Now, the other camp is, hey, here's a freebie, download this freebie, and I'm going to go ahead and then add you to my list as well. What I'll tell you is the conventional wisdom has been from every online marketing guru for a long time that you should be doing the second. People don't like join my newsletter. Now, I'll tell you there are exceptions. And what I mean by that is at some point, somebody in a Facebook group said, hey, how do I get on your newsletter list? I'm going to get your emails. And so, hey, every once in a while, somebody asks you that. But for the most part, people don't want to hear about, a newsletter because they're already getting a bunch of email. And so that's generally not something that gets them excited. It's, oh, hey, send me email every single week. If that's what you're selling, for the most part, they're going to say, no, thank you. On the other hand, if what you're offering is, hey, I'm going to give you this great freebie, and then I'm going to send you some emails too, that's going to be a much easier sell or conversion to get people to sign up. So that's why generally the conventional wisdom is you should go the freebie route. Now, I'm going to talk about a nuance on that in a second when I talk a little bit about the legal stuff here. But before I do that, what I want to talk about is that from my statement here that conventional wisdom of the experts is you need to have a freebie, that leads to a pretty important consequence. You have to have a great freebie that people want. Realistically, you probably need a lot more than one freebie. Maybe it's 457. I exaggerate in jest here. But the point is that you are going to need one or more freebies to give away to people to get them to join your email list. Now, there's kind of 2 categories of freebies. One are your core freebies. These are the things that are front and center on your website. They are the thing you're asking people to do. Depending on your business, you may have one core freebie or you may have more than one core freebie. But even if you have more than one, you're probably not going to have more than, say, 3 core freebies, unless you have multiple businesses and different businesses have them. But let's leave that aside. Generally, you're going to have somewhere between 1 and 3 core freebies. Part of the reason why you can't have more than 3 is if you have 16 core freebies on your homepage, people get confused. If you have 3, you can do it. Now, these freebies should link up to your offers somehow. So again, if you only have one offer, you might only need one core freebie. You probably do. You may have to try different freebies to see what people react to. But if you only have one offer, you're probably only going to have one freebie. But if you're like someone like me or another business that has lots of different offers, you're probably going to want to have more than one core freebie. In my case, for example, I have one of my core freebies is a freebie related to website legal issues because that's a good entry point where a lot of people find their way to me. Then I have other core freebies and I'm constantly developing new ones. As I'm recording this, I'm in the process of developing what will be my second and third core freebies. One that's going to be for coaches, online coaches and legal issues for them, and one that's going to be about course creation and the legal issues there. Those are kind of natural tracks that make sense to have these different freebies that relate to various offers I have. So that's generally how you're going to figure this out. But the point is that these are going to be the offers of freebies that are front and center. Think through what are you going to put on the home page of your website? And if you're going to pay for advertising to try to build your list, these are going to be the places you're probably going to send people to try to get people on your list, because this is the core. It's the most important, valuable things. Now, before I go off of this, people often ask, what is the best kind of freebie? You're going to have to test that for your business. But often what you're going to find is that your freebies need to be quick hitters. By that, I mean, it shouldn't be something where someone is going to have to spend 5-10 hours in your freebie. So a mini course, for example, I tried that in the past. It doesn't work because people don't know you yet. And so if they don't know you yet, they're probably not willing to commit 3, 4, 5 hours of their life. If you have a quick PDF that they can look at and assess quickly, hey, that's something they can bite off. So generally, you're going to want something that is digestible relatively quickly so that it's not a huge commitment on their time to get involved. So generally, that's what you should be thinking about when you think of freebies. Again, I'm not going to walk you through how to pick the right freebie for your business. There are plenty of great courses and folks out there who help you with that. If you have questions like this, I recommend go to Amy Porterfield's website. It's just amyporterfield.com. She's got a podcast. She has all kinds of great information about this. She's kind of one of the gurus that I follow the most on this subject. But I'm giving you that quick idea so you have it. One thing, though, after you have your core freebie or core freebies is you might also have some other extra freebies. Now, you could have these for various reasons. Maybe there used to be a core freebie for you, but they aren't anymore. Maybe you tried them out and it wasn't a great first way to get people in, but they're valuable. Maybe it's something you created related to your content. One of the things I'm going to try to do more of is create freebies for various of my podcast episodes related to the topic to help people do it. And, maybe it's something that goes deeper that you can use think of it as kind of a second round of freebie. So after they've gotten that initial PDF, you might, in a subsequent email say, hey, I've got this other thing that I think you might like too. And hey, it's free too. If you think about it, if you do those kinds of things and give extra freebies to people, they tend to like it. So you might have these extra freebies, but they're not your core. They're not the centerpieces of your marketing and list building efforts. They're kind of extras. They're the cherry on top, if you will, of your list building efforts. So that is freebies in a nutshell. After that, you're going to need software. And, there's a few different pieces. You've got to build what are called opt-in pages, which is where people put their information. You're going to need to then collect the email addresses that people put in, and then an ability to send the emails. Now, I use an all-in-one system called Kartra. I love it. If you're interested in taking a look at Kartra and haven't yet, you can go to youronlinegenius.com/Kartra. That's Kartra. And, you can find out about it. Again, that's an affiliate link. If you sign up through that, I will get something out of it, but I'm telling you, that's what I personally use and I love it. There are other all-in-one solutions out there, things like ClickFunnels and Kajabi. I used ClickFunnels in the past. I prefer Kartra to it. I've never used Kajabi, but a lot of people love it. But those are kind of the all-in-one. They're going to do everything for you for list building, but also for some other parts of your business as well. But you don't have to go that route. You can also put together kind of a combination of things. So you're going to need generally something to build your pages and collect the email addresses. People tend to use things like Lead Pages, Unbounce, or Thrive Themes, which has a Thrive Leads plugin that you can use to kind of collect email addresses and get all of this information. Then you'll need what's called an ESP, an email service provider. Things like a ConvertKit, a Drip, a MailChimp. There's a lot of them out there. I used to use ConvertKit before I switched over to Kartra. It's a very good system. If I had to pick one today, starting over, and I were not going to go with the all-in-one, I would go with ConvertKit just because I had a great experience with it, and everyone I've ever talked to who's used it loved it. So if you want to go this route, I would recommend that one, but take a look and see what makes sense for you and for your business. But the important thing is figure out a plan at the beginning and don't overcomplicate it. Don't sit there and say, oh, I can't start this process because I've got to do 157 hours of research here. Don't do that. Pick one and go with it. But, don't just randomly pick something. Make sure that you've made a thoughtful decision. But again, set an afternoon, look at the different options, make a decision, and move on. So now that's kind of broad strokes of, how you're going to collect in emails, etc. We need to talk about the legal implications and the legal issues involved. Now, you have to have a privacy policy if you're collecting email addresses. I talked about this literally on the last episode 48, and there are some other episodes. If you can just go to youronlinegenius.com/podcast, there's other episodes about legal issues for your website. But understand, if you're collecting information from people, including their email address, you've got to have a privacy policy on your website, period, full stop, no way around it. You need to have a link to that policy on whatever page people are landing on where they're going to enter their email address. So you've got to have that. There's no way around that. The other thing you need to be aware of is the GDPR. This is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is a European Union law that went into effect in May of 2018. So before this, the standard practice was, so before the GDPR went into effect, the standard practice was, hey, download my freebie, and then you'd have something that says, hey, and we'll treat your data consistent with our privacy policy. And that was it. You didn't tell them anything beyond that. But you then automatically added them to your list no matter what. The GDPR puts limits on that. If you or the person whose email address you're collecting is in the European Union, the GDPR applies and says you can't automatically add them to your list. You have to get affirmative consent from them to add them to your email list. So what does that mean? That means you're going to have to get them to affirmatively say, yes, add me to your general email list to receive emails from you. That's what you have to do to get this. Now, there's a couple of ways you could go about this. The clearest way is you go the standard freebie route. You say, hey, download the freebie, and then you might have a checkbox that people can say, yes, I also want to receive your regular emails. Again, you're going to want to use good copy to get them enticed, to tell them why they want to do it, etc. But you have a checkbox, and if someone doesn't check that box, you're not going to send them any emails other than giving them their freebie. And this is an important thing. You have to give them the freebie. You can't say you can only get the freebie if you agree to be on my list, etc. Now, there is another line of thought that came out, some email marketing folks who suggested that we should revert to saying, hey, join my newsletter, and when you do, the first thing I'm going to do is give you this freebie. Now, I'm not sure, quite honestly, if that's kosher under the GDPR. This is an issue that some lawyers think is fine. I'm not sure. It seems very much like saying, hey, you can only have my freebie if you agree to let me sign up or if you let me email you, which pretty much everybody says if you do it that way, that's not okay. And it seems like the same thing to me. But I'll tell you, there are other lawyers in the space who say they believe it's okay. So I share that with you as an option. What I'll tell you is I separately think that's not a good marketing tactic because let's be honest, prior to GDPR, everybody agreed that saying, hey, join my newsletter was not a good way to entice people to sign up for your list. So if that's your lead, I think you're not going to be taking maximum advantage of your freebie. And this is especially true if you are not in the European Union. So I'm in America. I don't have to get consent from people except for people who are in the European Union. That means if you're in the United States, if you're in Australia, if you're in Canada, if you're in Mexico, if you're in South America, if you're in Asia, I don't have to get GDPR consent from you. I can still go under the general rule that my privacy policy says, hey, when you sign up for a freebie, I'm going to add you to my email list. And that's good enough. I don't have to go any further than that. And so what I'll tell you is you still have the freedom to do exactly what we were doing before the GDPR, unless you are in the EU or for people who sign up from the EU. And so how do you do that? How do you do that segmenting? Well, the systems now are generally letting you do that. For example, Kartra, which I've set up, they have functionality built in where I turn on the GDPR functionality. It automatically senses where a visitor is coming from based upon their IP address. If they are in the EU, it has that box asking them whether they would like to receive my emails. They can either check it or not. It's up to them. And if they do check it, great, they get added to my list. If they don't get added to my normal overall list. But here's the great thing. If the visitor is not from the EU, they don't see any of that. And so they get treated exactly the same as they would have pre-GDPR. That's what I believe is the best practice from a marketing standpoint and from a legal standpoint. You need to check to see whether your system is able to do that. But I've got to address now a question that some people ask. Well, why wouldn't I just get consent from everyone? And some people say this, I'm worried that the United States is going to pass a law like the GDPR in the future. And so I don't want to have to go through this mess again in the future. Well, here's my response to that. Again, prior to GDPR, no one was doing this. And that tells you that from a marketing perspective, it's not the best way to market and list build. Asking everyone whether they want to be on your list or not is generally not an effective way to build your list. And so if we start from that perspective, we say, okay, then why would I do it? And you would only do it if there's a reason to do it other than the marketing benefit, because it's not a benefit. And so what I'm going to say to you is it possible that the United States might pass a similar law? Sure, it is. But you know what? Chances are they're not going to do it anytime soon. And the average amount of time someone's going to spend on your list isn't all that long. Even if you have a really good list where people are engaged and like it, you're going to have a lot of people come and go over a year. So let's say the U.S. passes a law a year from now, which goes into effect a year after that. You've got 2 whole years until that happens, until you have to comply with this new standard. I sure would like to have those people on my list for 2 years that I'm going to get by not using this GDPR level of consent. So that's the reason why you wouldn't just ask consent from everyone. If the U.S. changes their law in a year, hey, you can go ahead and make a change then. And what I'll tell you is trying to imagine what the U.S. Congress or any other lawmaker is going to do is a fool's errand. Prior to GDPR, no one thought that you would have to comply with this specific rule. So even if you'd been trying to, go ahead and get things in order in advance, you probably didn't. So I wouldn't worry about trying to comply in advance with a law that may be passed at some point in the future. Just meet your obligation. That is, if you're in the EU, you've got to get consent from everyone. That's the way it works. If you're not, as the marketer, you only have to get that level of consent from people who are coming to you from the EU. So that's the legal implications in a nutshell. Quickly walking through kind of the process of how the whole thing works. Traffic comes to what's generally called a landing page, something on your website or on a different website where people can sign up for your freebie and then join your list. You're going to, on that page, tell them why they want the freebie, what's great about it, link to your privacy policy and get them to sign up. Then you're going to send the freebie. You are probably going to send a short nurture sequence, which is what we're going to talk about in the next step. And then you're going to add them to your general newsletter or email list. So that's the process in a nutshell of building your list or getting people on your email list. So that takes us to the second phase of list building. This phase is nurture your list. Now, this comes down to the fact that the power of your list isn't in the size of your email list. It's not the total number of subscribers you have that matters. It's the number of engaged subscribers you have on your list that matters. In other words, you should care more about how many people are opening your emails, how many people are clicking on links in your emails, how many people are sending you responses to your emails. Those are the things that ultimately matter. Now, a list of emails that you have not sent a single email to in months isn't that valuable, even if it has 100,000 people on it. Because when you email them after not emailing them for months, they're going to be like, who is this guy? I don't even know who it is. It's probably going to go to their spam folder. And if it doesn't, they're just going to click and delete. What you care about are the people who have a relationship with you now because you have nurtured the relationship with them. And so they engage. They open your emails. They want to see what you have to say, etc. This will generally start with a pre-built sequence of emails that are going to go to people to onboard them when they sign up for your list. Don't just send them a short email that says, hey, here's that freebie you asked for, and that's it. Your first email that you send to someone who signs up for your list is the most important email you will ever send them because that's your first impression. You need that first email to be entertaining and to get their attention and to train them to pay attention. So you're going to want to have that first email be one that they are going to enjoy. Now, I tend to like trying to make things that are a bit lighthearted, that gives them a little bit of information, but is also entertaining. So you need to entertain at the same time that you're giving them their freebie. So your first email, it could be one that comes before you actually send the freebie, or it could be the email that sends them the freebie, should be entertaining. It should be something that tells them something about them that you know based upon them having signed up for your list. And it should be something that starts to train them that they want to open your emails. After that first email, you are going to generally want to have a short series of emails that kind of give people a flavor of who you are and tells your story, but do it through emails that make them understand how you can serve them. So again, this is get to know you so that they kind of start to have a relationship with you, but it can't be all about you because they don't want to read about how great you are and all these things. It needs to be things that make you relatable, but also make it clear to them how you can provide value to them. And understand these nurture welcome sequences are some of the most important because it's these emails, people haven't yet built a relationship with you. So they're going to have the least patience. So you're going to have to really kind of hook them and try to bring them in. Now, you might consider certain things like, remember when we talked about freebies? If you have additional freebies beyond your core freebies, this would be a great place to give them another freebie that they might like because they will get in the practice of learning, hey, this guy emails me maybe because he's going to give me something. Or if you have a podcast, maybe you send them a link to a podcast episode that's related to the freebie that they downloaded because then they get a sense of something else and you're providing value and saying, hey, here's something else you might like. So you get the point. You want to tell your story, deliver value to them, and start to build up this sense of them. Again, train them to open your email. So that's what your onboarding welcome sequence should do. After people get through that sequence, then you're going to add them to your general newsletter list. And again, I call it a newsletter. I don't send a newsletter. So I don't send something that's called a newsletter or anything that looks like a newsletter. This is just what I'm referring to as your overall general email list. Most people would call it your newsletter list or newsletter sequence. You need to be sending emails to that list on a regular basis to continue to nurture the relationship. Ideally, you would send an email to this list every single week. These emails are about giving value. It's not about promoting. It's not about asking them to buy anything. It's about saying, hey, here's something to add value to your life, to your list. Again, the idea, let's season the list. Let's nurture them. Let's build this relationship so they get in the practice of wanting to open emails from me. The easiest way to do this is if you are putting out regular weekly content, whether on a blog, a podcast, a video show, or anything like that, you send them a link. Again, don't just send them a link. It needs to be an email, but you're going to send them an email about that with a link that is going to bring them to that content to, again, give them value. Now, if you don't have weekly content, you tell stories, you give lessons in that email, and maybe ask a question. Maybe you find a way to interact with them. Maybe you tell them, hey, I'm thinking about, creating a new product about this. I'd love to get your feedback. What would you like to know? Just something to try to get them engaged. But again, the best is going to be either the email itself gives a lesson and value, or you're linking to content that's going to do that. And let me go ahead and point out something to you here. If you're already going to write an email that's going to include lessons and value and all of that, you'd be better off using some other form of content, whether it's a blog, a podcast, etc., to give that lesson, because that way people can find it who aren't yet on your email list. So I tend to think this is me telling you need to be creating weekly content. But if you're not, send an email anyway to try to continue the engagement. Now, again, these emails need to be interesting and entertaining. You need to train them to open and read emails that you send. So if your emails are boring and you consistently send a weekly boring email, people are going to stop reading it. And that is not good, right? I mean, you don't want to train them, hey, anytime this guy sends me something, it's boring. I don't want to open it. You want to train them, hey, I'm probably going to learn something, but maybe I'll get a chuckle about this too, or I'll learn something, or I'll get some value out of it. So that's the idea. You can do that with stories. You can do that with some pictures. You can do that with some humor. Do something to make it interesting. Often the best way to do this is to talk about yourself, to tell stories, to talk about mistakes that you've made that relate to these things. Just come up with something. And again, it doesn't have to be long and drawn out, just something so it's not just a boring, lesson of some sort. People generally don't want that in an email. And so often, you need to add something to the mix. Now, one final tip is that the PS line is powerful in an email. If you're asking someone to do something in your email, to click on a link, to go to your content, to do anything like that, your PS line should have a link to that generally. But you also want some other powerful strategy. Often what I'm doing these days in my emails is if I tell a brief story in the email, the PS will be an epilogue. It'll be something to kind of resolve a loop that I opened in the story and didn't close until the PS line, but that loop needs to relate to what I'm asking them to click on. So that's generally what I'm doing these days, but you just need to have some PS often at the end to do it, because a lot of people are simply trained now, go down, read the PS. And so you need to have that in there. So generally you should have a PS. It should have a link to whatever you're trying to get them to click on and open, etc., but also have something else. So that's the one concrete tidbit I'm going to give you. Now, another thing I've got to tell you, because this is what people get nervous about in sending regular emails. They will say, but if I email them, people will unsubscribe. Well, that's absolutely, positively true. Some people are going to unsubscribe. Guess what? That's a good thing. Having an email list and being afraid to email because someone might unsubscribe is kind of silly when you think about it, because then what's the point of having the email list? If you literally are never going to email your list because you're afraid people are going to unsubscribe, then your email list is valueless and you should not be spending time on it. The fact is that it's going to happen, but it's not a big deal. If someone unsubscribes when you send them a value-packed email that's not promotional, where you're just giving value, whether it's giving a lesson in the email or linking to some content, if they're going to unsubscribe on that, so what? They're not your people. Don't worry about it. Maybe they just don't want to be on any email list. That's okay. But guess what? If people are going to unsubscribe at that point, they're going to unsubscribe no matter what. And so if you're just saying, well, I'll just wait till I'm going to do something very valuable, they're going to unsubscribe then. So don't worry about that. Also, there's an ancillary benefit. I would rather get people to unsubscribe than continue to have them on my list, but never opening emails or getting any content from me. Because the way these email service providers work, you're paying based upon the number of subscribers you have. So the more subscribers you have, the more money you're going to pay. I don't want a lot of people sitting on my list who don't care and don't want to get anything from me. If they don't want to hear from me, I want them off. That way I don't pay for them. So again, don't worry about unsubscribers. It's going to happen. It's part of life. Move on. So that's the second phase. You're going to nurture your list. Now let's talk about the third phase of list building. This is to clean and scrub your list. Again, you want an engaged list, not vanity numbers. You would much rather have a smaller list, but people are engaged, people are opening, people are clicking, than to have a big list where nobody does any of that stuff. We talked about that in Nurture. But this means you need to actively get people off your list if they're not engaged. And there's two categories I want to talk about. First, cold subscribers. What is a cold subscriber? These are people who don't open your emails for an extended period of time. So again, you can set up whatever metric you want, but if you're sending weekly emails and people go multiple months without opening one, that means they've received 8, 12 emails from you without opening. What are the chances that all of a sudden tomorrow they're going to wake up and say, oh, hey, I'm going to start opening his emails again and going to want to get your content? It's not very good. What's more likely to happen, quite honestly, is those people have forgotten who you are. And then at some point in the future, they're going to wake up, open your email and say, who is this guy? I never subscribed to this list. They're going to unsubscribe and mark you and report you as spam, even though you're not. Even though they asked to be on your list, the fact is they've forgotten. So what you should do is periodically run what's called a re-engagement or a list scrub sequence. What you're going to do is you're going to figure out people who have not opened in a certain period of time. You're then going to send those people a pre-programmed series of emails that tells them, hey, I notice you haven't been opening my emails. And again, you often, if it's your on-brand identity, you're going to want to be cheeky about it, maybe make some jokes and figure out how you want to do it. But you're basically, the gist of it is, hey, I notice you haven't opened my emails. If you don't want to be on my list, I really don't want you to stay on here. It doesn't do us any good. I'm going to let you go. But so what you do is you ask them, hey, if you want to stay on my list, great. I'd love to have you click on this link. Anyone who, after the sequence is done, has not clicked on that link or one of the links in one of the emails saying they want to stay on will get unsubscribed and deleted from your list. Those are the people who don't want to do it. Maybe they never even opened the sequence. Maybe they opened the sequence but didn't click on the link. That's a pretty strong message that they don't want to get your emails anymore. So I recently did this, and I will tell you my numbers. When I started the sequence, I was just south of 5,000 subscribers. I cut a little over 1,000 people off of my list by doing this. So again, I was willing to cut over 20% of my list because they weren't opening. And the metric I used, I basically went back and said, hey, they'd been on my list, my newsletter sequence, for at least 3 months and had not opened a single email in that time period. My view, hey, if that's who you are, then no problem, but I'm not going to continue to send you emails. So I cut over 1,000 people off my list just recently by doing a re-engagement or scrub sequence. And what I'll tell you is it hurts when you do it, but you should do it. There are all kinds of advantages of it, aside from the fact that you're not going to be paying to have these people who don't really want to be on your list anymore. The more engaged your list is, the more likely it is that your emails will land in people's inboxes, not in junk, not in spam, not in promotions. So you generally want your open rates to be high. So getting rid of people who aren't opening will help with that. So again, you should be doing this, and you should be doing it multiple times a year. I'm going to do it at least twice a year. This year, I will have done it 3 times. I did it once before GDPR went into effect. I just did it, and I will be doing it before year end one last time. The other piece to cleaning your list, though, is to find if there are trouble emails on your list. There are certain email addresses that the email service providers have figured out these people complain a lot. They mark a lot of emails as spam, or they do this or they do that. Those emails, you don't want to be sending them to. I'll just tell you, because they potentially are going to cause trouble for you down the line, and you just want to avoid it. So some systems are automatically going to flag and blacklist these people and not send to them anymore. If your system doesn't, you should run your system through a list cleaning service periodically to get those people off your list. Don't go crazy on it. For example, my email, our Klinck at my law firm, is flagged not because I've complained, but because my domain is one that accepts all emails. So you got to be careful, and you've got to look and make sure you're being judicious, but you want to get rid of troublemakers. One service that's out there that does this that I've used is Clean13. I don't have any affiliation with them, but you can check them out. It's relatively cheap to run your list through their system, find troubles, and then you can get rid of them. So that's cleaning your list once you've got it. Do that periodically. That brings us to the 4th phase of list building. This is the most important one. Sell to your list. The people who are on your email list are not your friends. They're not your buddies. You shouldn't view them that way. They are potential customers. If you're on my list, hey, and I know you're great, I love you, but I hope you recognize that you're on the list, an email list of a business. So at the end of the day, we as business people, as entrepreneurs, we are trying to make money. Our email lists are about making money. Yeah, we want to make it fun. We want to provide value. We want to serve. We want to do all of that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make money. And so these people, you should not be afraid to try to sell to your list. These are people who've asked to hear from you. They have asked for you to keep them updated. They have asked for information from you. These are the first people who should be hearing about your offers, about things you have to offer, about those things. I'll just tell you, if you're on my list, you're going to hear about, anytime I have a new offer, you're going to hear about it. If I create a new webinar, you're going to hear about it. If I create a new launch sequence, you're going to hear about it. If I'm going to appear at a virtual summit, you're going to hear about it. If I decide, and I don't do affiliate marketing very often, but if I decide I want to do affiliate marketing every once in a while, you're going to hear about it. Now, I hope that doesn't offend you. I hope that doesn't, turn you off, but it's a fact of life. And if it does and you don't like that about me and my email list, okay, we can still be friends, but you should probably unsubscribe now. Because the purpose of my list is to help me build my business. And I can't do that without trying to sell to you from time to time. Now, again, let's not go overboard. I don't send 157 promotional emails a year. That's too much. I mean, I don't know where the line is, but it's somewhere south of, one every other day. I mean, that's definitely true. And, I'm not going to be someone who's promoting constantly and constantly telling you stuff. I will go through seasons. When I go through a launch, for example, I'm going to have a bunch of promotional emails, but I'll give you a quick way. Hey, if you don't want to get those promotional emails, I'll give you a way to say, don't send me those, but I want to stay on your list. And that's okay. And if I go through an affiliate promotion at some point, there will be a handful of emails about that. But that's not the day-to-day of what you're getting from me. Most of what you're getting from me is going to be value. It's me giving you stuff and saying, hey, here is this podcast episode where I talked about X, Y, and Z. Go check it out. You're going to get some value from it. And so as long as that's your view and you're sending out the regular content and you're cognizant and not just sending a promotional email or two every week, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about that. And yes, people will unsubscribe when you send them promotional emails. They may even get mad at you and, send you a nastygram about why are you promoting to me? I say, too bad. I mean, look, if you unsubscribe and aren't mad at me, cool. We can still be friends, everything like that. If you get mad at me because I send you a promotional email every once in a while, I got no time for you. Again, I'm in business. That's why I'm doing this. That's why you're doing what you do. We have to admit that and not be afraid of that and not be embarrassed of that fact. And if someone signs up for your business email list, they can't be mad because you send them a promotional email from time to time. So sell to your list. Don't be afraid of it. Don't shy away from it. So those are the 4 phases of building your list. First is to build by get people on it. Second, nurture your list. Third, clean your list. And fourth, sell to your list. Do those things on a regular basis and you will be in good shape and have a good foundation for your business. So that's it for this week's episode of the Online Genius Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And again, bonus points and kudos if you'll take a couple of minutes to leave a review and maybe share the episode with others who you think could use it. But most important, just subscribe so you don't miss anything. And don't forget to join the Online Genius community by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. We'll be talking more about the keys to success there. And so you'll get some more information. You get a chance to interact directly with me. I'd love to see you there. And that's it for this week. I'll see you back here next week for episode 50. Yeah, episode 50 of the Online Genius Podcast. I am excited for it. Until next week, I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.